They say a mother's love is unconditional, that no matter what your child does, no matter how much they hurt you, you'll always find a way to forgive them. Well, I'm here to tell you that even a mother's heart has its breaking point. And mine shattered completely on what was supposed to be the most beautiful day of the year. It was Mother's Day, 2024. I had spent weeks planning the perfect family gathering. I decorated the dining room with fresh peonies, Sarah's favorite flowers since she was little. I made her childhood favorite, blueberry pancakes with homemade whipped cream, the recipe I'd perfected over 23 years of Mother's Days. I even wore the pearl necklace she'd given me for my 40th birthday, the one she'd saved up for by working extra shifts at her part-time job in college. I thought this Mother's Day would be different, special. Sarah had been distant lately, caught up in her new life with her fiancé Marcus. I understood that. Young love, new priorities. I'd been there myself once, but I missed my daughter. I missed our Saturday morning coffee talks, our spontaneous shopping trips, the way she used to call me just to share something funny that happened at work. The table was set for 6. My husband David, myself, Sarah, and Marcus, my son Jake with his girlfriend Emma. I had prepared enough food to feed a small army, the way mothers do when they want everything to be perfect. I kept glancing at the clock as 10 o'clock became 10:30, then 11. "She's probably just running late," David said, squeezing my shoulder. He's always been the optimist in our marriage, the one who sees the best in everyone, especially our children. "You know how she is with time." But something felt different this morning. There was a weight in the air, a tension I couldn't quite name. When Sarah finally walked through our front door at 11:45, she wasn't alone. Marcus was there, of course, but behind them came someone I didn't recognize. A woman in her 60s with silver hair and an expensive handbag clutched tightly in her manicured hands. "Mom, Dad," Sarah said, her voice oddly formal, "this is Marcus's mother, Patricia." I smiled warmly, extending my hand. "Patricia, how wonderful to finally meet you. I've heard so much about you. Please come in. I hope you're hungry. I may have gotten a little carried away with breakfast." But Patricia didn't return my smile. She looked around our home, the home David and I had saved for years to buy, the home where we'd raised our children, the home filled with family photos and Sarah's artwork from elementary school still hanging on the refrigerator, and her expression was disappointed. "Sarah told me so much about you," Patricia said, but her tone suggested none of it had been particularly flattering. That should have been my first warning. We sat down to eat, and I tried to keep the conversation light. I asked about their wedding plans, about Marcus's new job at the law firm, about whether they'd decided on a venue. But every question I asked seemed to irritate Sarah more. "Actually, Mom," Sarah said, setting down her fork with more force than necessary, "we need to talk to you about the wedding." "Of course, sweetheart, whatever you need." Sarah exchanged a look with Marcus, then with Patricia. "We've decided to scale back the guest list significantly." I nodded encouragingly. "That's very practical. Weddings can get so expensive, and honestly, the most important thing is that you two are happy." "The thing is," Sarah continued, her voice getting colder with each word, "we've realized that we want the wedding to reflect our values, our vision for our future. And some of the people we originally planned to invite just don't align with that vision anymore." David leaned forward. "What do you mean, honey?" Sarah looked directly at me. "I mean that we've outgrown certain relationships. Certain family dynamics that are holding us back from becoming who we're meant to be." The room went silent except for the sound of Jake's fork hitting his plate. Emma shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Patricia smiled, actually smiled, as if she was enjoying a particularly good show. "Sarah," I said carefully, "I'm not sure I understand what you're trying to say." "I'm saying that Marcus and I have been talking with a therapist about toxic family patterns. About how some people in our lives are emotional vampires who drain our energy and hold us back from achieving our potential." Each word hit me like a physical blow. Emotional vampires. "Mom, you have to understand. All my life, you've made everything about you. Every achievement I've had, every milestone, every moment of happiness found a way to center yourself in it. You've suffocated me with your expectations and your constant need for validation." I felt David's hand find mine under the table, but even his touch couldn't stop the world from tilting sideways. "Sweetheart, if I've ever made you feel that way, I'm so sorry. Can we talk about this? Can we?" "There's nothing to talk about," Sarah interrupted. "Marcus and I have made our decision. We're going no contact with toxic family members starting today." "No contact," the words came out as barely a whisper. Sarah stood up, Patricia and Marcus flanking her like bodyguards. "As far as I'm concerned, Mom, you're dead to me. We both are. We're done enabling this dysfunction." And then she was gone, just like that. My daughter, the little girl I'd rocked to sleep through countless nights of colic, the teenager I'd stayed up until midnight helping with college applications, the young woman I'd supported through her worst breakup and celebrated with through her best achievements gone. I sat at that table surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to be a perfect Mother's Day, and I couldn't even cry. The shock was too complete, too devastating. Jake and Emma left soon after, murmuring apologies and promises to call later. David held me as I finally broke down, but even his comfort felt distant and hollow. What I didn't know then was that Sarah's declaration of war was just the beginning. What I didn't know was that Patricia, Marcus's mother, had been orchestrating this moment for months, slowly poisoning my daughter against me with carefully planted suggestions about enmeshment and boundary setting and toxic patterns. What I didn't know was that Sarah had already started telling people her version of events, that I was a narcissistic mother who had emotionally abused her, that going no contact was an act of self-preservation, that anyone who continued to have a relationship with me was enabling my toxic behavior. But here's what Sarah didn't know. I had raised a strong, intelligent daughter who had learned everything she knew about determination and strategic thinking from me, and she was about to discover that cutting someone out of your life doesn't make them disappear. Sometimes it just makes them more dangerous. The first few weeks after Mother's Day were the darkest of my life. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on anything except replaying every conversation, every moment, every interaction with Sarah, trying to figure out where I had gone so wrong. David tried to be supportive, but I could see the strain in his eyes. He was losing his daughter too, but he was also watching his wife fall apart in real time. Jake called every day, assuring me that Sarah was being ridiculous, that she'd come to her senses soon. But as days turned into weeks, that optimism began to feel more like wishful thinking. The real cruelty came in the form of social media. Sarah didn't block me immediately. I think she wanted me to see what she was posting. Pictures of her and Marcus at dinner with Patricia, all three of them smiling and laughing. A post about choosing your family with a photo of her and Marcus's family at some upscale restaurant. Another post about healing from generational trauma, with a lengthy caption about breaking free from toxic patterns. Each post felt like a knife twisting in my chest, but the worst one came 3 weeks after Mother's Day. It was a photo of Sarah wearing a white dress, not her wedding dress, but something elegant and expensive looking. The caption read, "Celebrated my engagement today with my real family. So grateful to have found people who love and support me unconditionally, without strings attached. Some people think love means control, but real love means freedom. #newbeginnings, #chosen your family healing journey." The comments were even worse. Dozens of people I didn't recognize, clearly Marcus's friends and family, posting things like "You deserve so much better," and "Proud of you for breaking the cycle," and "Your strength is inspiring." But one comment stopped me cold. It was from Patricia. "Welcome to the family, darling. We've been waiting for you to come home to us." Come home to us, as if my daughter had been lost and Patricia had found her. As if 23 years of love and sacrifice and sleepless nights and proud moments meant nothing. That's when I realized this wasn't just about Sarah's need for independence or even her genuine feelings about our relationship. This was about Patricia systematically replacing me in my daughter's life, convincing her that their family was better, healthier, more supportive than the one she'd grown up in. I started paying attention then, really paying attention. I looked up Patricia on social media, researched Marcus's family, started connecting dots that I should have seen earlier. Patricia Williams, successful real estate agent, divorced, one son. But as I dug deeper, I found the local news articles from 15 years ago. Marcus's father hadn't just left, he'd fled. There had been accusations of emotional abuse, of Patricia's controlling behavior, of her attempts to isolate him from his friends and family. The divorce had been messy and public, with Patricia eventually awarded sole custody after a bitter court battle. I found Marcus's father on Facebook. He lived 3 states away now, remarried with 2 young children. I sent him a carefully worded message, introducing myself as Sarah's mother and mentioning that I was concerned about the influence Patricia was having on my daughter. His response came within hours, and it was longer and more detailed than I could have hoped for. "I'm so sorry this is happening to your family," he wrote. "I should have warned you somehow, but Patricia made it clear years ago that any attempt to contact Marcus would result in legal action. She's a master manipulator. The way she destroyed my relationship with my son was so gradual, so calculated, that I didn't even realize what was happening until it was too late. She convinced Marcus that I was unstable, that I didn't really love him, that she was the only one who truly understood and supported him. By the time I figured out what she was doing, Marcus refused to speak to me. I haven't heard from him in over 10 years. He went on to describe Patricia's pattern. She would identify her target's closest relationships and systematically undermine them. She'd start with small suggestions, tiny seeds of doubt. Does your mother really support your dreams, or does she just want to control you? I've noticed your father seems dismissive when you talk about your achievements. Maybe your friends are jealous of your success. Slowly, methodically, she would create distance between her target and their support system, all while positioning herself as the only person who truly understood and cared for them. It was textbook emotional manipulation, and I was watching it happen to my daughter in real time. But knowing what Patricia was doing and being able to prove it were two different things. Sarah had made it clear that any attempt to contact her would be considered harassment. She'd blocked my phone number, my email, all my social media accounts. She'd even called my sister and told her that anyone who passed along messages from me would be cut off as well. I felt helpless watching my daughter disappear into Patricia's web of manipulation and being unable to do anything about it. But then something happened that changed everything. It was a Thursday afternoon in July, about 2 months after the Mother's Day incident. I was at the grocery store, trying to work up the energy to care about what we were having for dinner, when I ran into Carol Peterson, my old neighbor from when Sarah was in middle school. "Linda," she said, pulling me into a hug. "How are you? How's Sarah? I saw on Facebook that she got engaged." I managed a weak smile. She's doing well, very happy. "Oh, I'm so excited for the wedding. When is it again?" Something in her tone made me look at her more carefully. "I'm not sure you're invited, Carol. It's going to be a very small ceremony." Carol's face fell. "Oh, I just assumed. Sarah called me last month asking if I could write a letter for her." "A letter?" "A character reference letter. She said she needed it for some legal matter, something about proving that she'd had a difficult childhood. She asked me to write about what I remembered from when she was living at home, whether I'd ever witnessed any concerning behavior from you or David." My blood went cold. "What did you tell her?" "Well, nothing, of course. I told her that you were one of the best mothers I'd ever known, that I used to wish I could be more like you with my own kids. I said I couldn't in good conscience write anything negative because I'd never seen anything negative." She seemed disappointed. After Carol and I parted ways, I sat in my car in the grocery store parking lot for 20 minutes, trying to process what I'd just learned. Sarah wasn't just cutting me out of her life, she was actively trying to build a case against me. She was reaching out to people from our past, looking for anyone who would validate her narrative that I had been a bad mother. That night, I called my sister Margaret and told her what Carol had said. Margaret was quiet for a long time. "Linda," she finally said, "I need to tell you something. Sarah called me last week." "What did she say?" "She asked me about the time when she was 15 and broke her arm. She wanted to know if I remembered you being emotionally absent during her recovery, if I thought you were more concerned about how her injury reflected on you than about her actual well-being." I remembered that incident clearly. Sarah had broken her arm during soccer practice, and I had taken 2 weeks off work to take care of her. I'd slept on the couch next to her bed for the first few nights because she was in pain and scared. I'd driven her to every physical therapy appointment, helped her shower and get dressed, even fed her when using her left hand was too difficult. "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That you were devoted to her recovery, that you barely left her side." But Linda, the way she was asking the questions, it was like she was fishing for something specific. Like someone had told her that incident was an example of bad parenting, and she was trying to find evidence to support that theory. After we hung up, I realized that Patricia wasn't just isolating Sarah from her current support system. She was helping her rewrite history, taking every normal part of Sarah's childhood and spinning it as evidence of abuse or neglect. But Patricia had made one critical mistake. In her eagerness to turn Sarah against me, she had underestimated how many people genuinely cared about our family and how willing they would be to tell me what Sarah was doing. Over the next few weeks, I heard from 3 more people Sarah had contacted: her high school guidance counselor, our former pediatrician, and the mother of Sarah's best friend from elementary school. All of them had given similar responses. They couldn't and wouldn't write anything negative about me because their experience had been entirely positive. But they were all concerned enough to reach out to me, and slowly I began to realize that I wasn't as powerless as I'd thought. If Sarah wanted to build a case against me, she was going to discover that the evidence didn't support her narrative. If Patricia thought she could turn my daughter against me by rewriting the past, she was about to learn that other people had memories too. And if they both thought I was going to disappear quietly, and let them destroy 23 years of love and sacrifice without a fight. They had seriously underestimated the woman who had raised Sarah to be strong and determined. It was time to remind my daughter exactly where she had learned to be a fighter. The turning point came in August. I was having lunch with my friend Diana, a family therapist, and telling her about everything that had happened. She listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and finally sat back with a thoughtful expression. "Linda," she said, "what you're describing sounds like parental alienation. It's a real psychological phenomenon, and Patricia is using textbook tactics. But Sarah is an adult, she's 23 years old. Parental alienation can happen at any age, especially when the alienating party is skilled at manipulation. The fact that Patricia targeted your relationship specifically, that she's encouraging Sarah to rewrite her childhood history, that she's positioning herself as the better mother figure, these are all classic signs." Diana leaned forward. "Here's the thing about parental alienation. It typically works in the short term because the alienating party is very skilled at identifying and exploiting existing tensions or insecurities. But it rarely works in the long term because it requires the target to maintain a false narrative about their past, and that's psychologically exhausting." "What do you mean?" "I mean that eventually, Sarah is going to have moments where her real memories don't match the story Patricia has helped her construct. And when that happens, she's going to start questioning everything. The problem is, by that time, she may be so isolated from her real support system that she won't know how to reach out." Diana was right, but waiting for Sarah to come to her senses felt impossible when I was watching her slip further away every day. The wedding planning posts continued on social media, always featuring Patricia prominently and never mentioning David or me. Sarah had changed her last name on Facebook to Williams, as if she was already part of Marcus's family. But then Diana gave me an idea that changed everything. "What if," she said, "instead of trying to contact Sarah directly, you focused on creating a record of the truth? What if you gathered all the evidence you could about what really happened during her childhood, not to use against her, but to preserve it for when she's ready to remember?" That night, I started what I came to think of as the Memory Project. I went through every photo album, every school report card, every Mother's Day card Sarah had ever made me. I contacted her teachers, her coaches, her friends' parents, anyone who had been part of her life during her childhood and teenage years. I wasn't looking for people to badmouth Sarah or validate my hurt feelings. I was looking for the truth. I was creating a comprehensive record of what our relationship had actually been like, documented with photos and letters and testimonials from neutral third parties. What I found was a story very different from the one Patricia had helped Sarah construct. I found evidence of a little girl who had adored her mother, who had written essays about me for school assignments, who had insisted on matching outfits when she was 6 and mother-daughter manicures when she was 16. I found thank you notes Sarah had written me throughout college, expressing gratitude for my support and telling me I was her role model. I found text messages she'd sent me just months before meeting Marcus, calling me her best friend, and saying she hoped she could be half the mother to her future children that I had been to her. I compiled everything into a private blog, not to share publicly, but to preserve. Each post was a different year of Sarah's life, documented with photos and memories and evidence of our relationship. It was painful to put together, but also healing. It reminded me that the love between Sarah and me had been real, whatever was happening now, but I also made copies of everything and gave them to my lawyer. "I'm not planning to take legal action," I told him, "but I want to be prepared just in case." "In case of what?" "In case Sarah starts making public accusations, in case Patricia escalates. In case this gets worse before it gets better." It was a good thing I was prepared because in September it got much worse. The wedding was scheduled for October 15th, and in the weeks leading up to it, Sarah's social media posts became increasingly aggressive. She posted articles about breaking free from narcissistic parents and healing from childhood trauma. She shared quotes about blood family versus chosen family and the courage to live your authentic life. But the worst one came 2 weeks before the wedding. It was a long, rambling post about her journey to healing that painted me as a controlling, manipulative mother who had emotionally abused her throughout her childhood. She described specific incidents, my reaction when she'd wanted to quit piano lessons, the time I'd cried when she decided not to go to my alma mater for college, the way I'd guilted her about not calling enough after she'd moved out. Each incident was real but twisted beyond recognition. Yes, I had been disappointed when she'd wanted to quit piano after 8 years of lessons, but only because I'd seen how much joy music brought her, and I was worried she was giving up too easily. Yes, I had cried when she'd chosen a different college, but only because I was proud of her independence and sad to see her growing up so fast. Yes, I had mentioned that I missed our regular phone calls, but only because I loved talking to her, not to make her feel guilty. But in Sarah's retelling, these normal moments of parental emotion became evidence of manipulation and control. And worse, the post was public. It was seen by hundreds of people, including many who knew our family. My phone started ringing within hours. Friends calling to offer support, colleagues asking if I was okay, neighbors wondering what was really going on. It was humiliating and heartbreaking and infuriating all at once. But it was also Sarah's biggest mistake, because in making her accusations public, she had opened the door for other people to respond publicly, and they did. Margaret was the first. She commented on Sarah's post with a simple message. I was present for most of the incidents you're describing, and your version of events is not accurate. Your mother was devoted to you, and this public character assassination is cruel and unfair. Then Jake commented, Sarah, I lived in the same house. Mom was an amazing parent to both of us. Whatever issues you're working through, this isn't the way to handle them. But the comment that really mattered came from Mrs. Rodriguez, Sarah's fourth-grade teacher. Sarah, I taught you for a year and interacted with your mother regularly. She was one of the most supportive, loving parents I ever worked with. I still remember how proud she was of your science fair project, how she stayed up all night helping you build that volcano. This post breaks my heart because it's so far from the truth of what I witnessed. More people began commenting. Sarah's pediatric nurse, the mother of her childhood best friend. My own mother, Sarah's grandmother, who rarely used social media but created an account just to defend me. Within 24 hours, Sarah's narrative was falling apart in real time, contradicted by dozens of people who had actually been present during her childhood. The response was so overwhelming that Sarah eventually deleted the post, but not before screenshots had been shared widely. That's when Patricia made her own fatal error. Unable to let the narrative she'd worked so hard to create be disputed, Patricia posted on her own Facebook page, sharing screenshots of Sarah's deleted post and adding her own commentary about brave young women who have the courage to speak their truth despite family members who refuse to acknowledge their harmful behavior. Patricia's post was mean-spirited and petty, attacking not just me, but everyone who had defended me in the comments. She implied that we were all lying, that we were complicit in my emotional abuse of Sarah, that we were part of a toxic family system that refused to take accountability. But Patricia had overplayed her hand. Her attack on our family and friends was so over the top, so obviously motivated by malice rather than genuine concern for Sarah, that it finally revealed her true motivations to anyone paying attention. And Sarah was definitely paying attention. The wedding was 6 days away when Sarah called me for the first time in 5 months. Mom, her voice was small, uncertain, nothing like the confident young woman who had declared me dead to her on Mother's Day. Sarah, I kept my voice neutral, but my heart was racing. I saw what Patricia posted about you, about our family. I saw it too. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth. Of course. Did you ever contact Marcus's father? I took a deep breath. Yes, I did. What did he tell you? He told me about Patricia's pattern of isolating the people she cares about from their families. He told me that she did the same thing to Marcus that she's been doing to you. Sarah was quiet for a long time. When she spoke again, her voice was shaking. Mom, I think I've made a terrible mistake. The conversation that followed was the hardest of my life. Sarah cried as she told me about the months of subtle manipulation, the way Patricia had slowly convinced her that every normal aspect of our relationship was actually evidence of toxicity. She talked about the pressure she'd felt to cut contact with me, the way Patricia had made it seem like the only way to prove her love for Marcus was to reject her own family. She told me that if I really loved Marcus, I would trust his mother's judgment about what was best for us, Sarah said. She said that my resistance to cutting contact with you proved that I wasn't ready for marriage, that I was still too enmeshed with my family of origin. What changed your mind? Her post. Reading what she wrote about you, about Jake, about Grandma, I didn't recognize the person she was describing, and I realized that for months I'd been seeing you through her eyes instead of my own. Sarah came home that night. She walked into our living room where David and I were sitting, and she looked exactly like the little girl who used to run to me when she'd had a nightmare. Mom, she said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I held my daughter while she cried, and for the first time in 5 months I felt like I could breathe again. But the story doesn't end there. because while Sarah had realized her mistake, she was still engaged to Marcus, still planning to marry him in 5 days, still financially and emotionally entangled with Patricia's family. I don't know what to do, Sarah said. The wedding is Saturday. Everything's paid for. All the invitations have been sent. But Mom, I can't marry him. Not after this. I don't know who Marcus really is anymore, and I don't know who I am when I'm with him. What do you want to do? I want to call off the wedding. But I'm scared. Patricia has made it clear that if I don't marry Marcus, she'll make sure I'm completely cut off from him and his family. And I do love him, Mom. I just don't know if love is enough when it comes with so many conditions. David and I helped Sarah through the hardest decision of her young life. We talked through her options, listened to her fears, and ultimately supported her choice to postpone the wedding indefinitely. She called Marcus on Thursday night. The conversation didn't go well. Marcus accused her of being manipulated by her toxic family, of throwing away their future because she couldn't handle the honest feedback about her family dynamics. He said that if she walked away now, she was proving that she wasn't mature enough for marriage anyway. Patricia's reaction was even worse. She sent Sarah a series of text messages that were so vicious, so cruel, that Sarah showed them to me with shaking hands. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life," one read. "You'll never find anyone who loves you the way Marcus does. You're choosing dysfunction over growth, and you'll regret this for the rest of your life." Another said, "I tried to save you from your family's toxicity, but you're too weak and brainwashed to accept help. Don't come crying to us when you realize what you've lost." But the one that revealed Patricia's true nature said, "You were never good enough for my son anyway. I only tolerated you because Marcus insisted, but honestly, you're just like your mother, selfish, manipulative, and incapable of real love." Reading those messages, I felt a cold fury settle in my chest. This woman had spent months convincing my daughter that I was the toxic one, while hiding her own cruelty behind a mask of concern and sophistication. Sarah called off the wedding on Friday morning. Most of the guests had already arrived in town, the venue was decorated, the cake was made. The financial loss was significant, but Sarah said it was worth it to escape before making a permanent mistake. The social media fallout was immediate and brutal. Patricia posted a lengthy explanation about Sarah's mental breakdown and return to unhealthy family patterns. She painted Sarah as unstable and claimed that our family had sabotaged the relationship out of jealousy. But this time, Sarah was ready. She posted her own response, sharing screenshots of Patricia's cruel text messages alongside a calm, thoughtful explanation of what had really happened. She talked about emotional manipulation, about the gradual isolation she'd experienced, about the way Patricia had convinced her to cut ties with everyone who truly loved her. "I was so focused on proving that I was mature enough for marriage," Sarah wrote, "that I forgot to ask whether this was the kind of marriage I actually wanted. A relationship that required me to abandon my family and accept one person's version of who I should be." The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people commented with support, many sharing their own stories of manipulation and control in relationships. Several of Marcus's friends reached out privately to say they'd been concerned about Patricia's influence, but hadn't known how to speak up. But the most surprising response came from Marcus himself 3 weeks after the canceled wedding. He called Sarah and asked if they could meet for coffee. "I've been thinking about everything that happened," he said. "And I realized that my mother did the exact same thing to my father. I just never saw it because I was a kid when it happened, and she was all I had left." Marcus told Sarah that he'd reached out to his father for the first time in over 10 years, prompted by her decision to prioritize her family relationships. The conversation had been eye-opening and painful. "My dad told me things about my childhood that I'd forgotten or dismissed," Marcus said. "Ways that my mother isolated him, turned me against him, convinced me that his love was conditional while hers was pure. I've been in therapy every week since the wedding was called off, trying to understand how I let this happen." Marcus and Sarah talked for hours that day. They both acknowledged that their relationship had been built on a foundation of manipulation and control, and that even if they still cared about each other, they couldn't build a healthy future without first addressing the damage that had been done. They decided to stay friends but end their romantic relationship. Marcus continued therapy and slowly rebuilt his relationship with his father. Sarah moved back home temporarily while she figured out her next steps. As for Patricia, her reaction to losing control of both Sarah and Marcus was swift and predictable. She spread rumors about our family around town, tried to damage David's business relationships, and even called Sarah's employer to make accusations about her mental stability. But Patricia had burned too many bridges. Too many people had seen her true nature during the wedding fallout. Her own real estate business suffered as word spread about her behavior, and several of her long-term clients quietly found new agents. The final blow came when Marcus's father decided to pursue legal action for parental alienation. Armed with evidence, Marcus was now willing to provide about Patricia's manipulation tactics. While the case was still pending, the publicity around it ruined what was left of Patricia's reputation. 6 months later, Sarah sent me a text on Mother's Day. "Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. I love you, Mom." We spent that Mother's Day quietly, just the four of us: David, Sarah, Jake, and me. We made blueberry pancakes again, but this time they tasted like forgiveness and second chances. Sarah still struggles sometimes with the guilt of what happened, with the relationships that were damaged by her months of believing Patricia's lies. But she's in therapy now, working through the manipulation she experienced and learning to trust her own judgment again. She's also started speaking publicly about parental alienation, sharing her story to help other families recognize the warning signs. She says that if her experience can prevent even one family from going through what we did, then something good will have come from it. I've learned a lot from this experience too. I've learned that sometimes the people who claim to have our children's best interests at heart are the ones we need to worry about most. I've learned that a mother's love isn't always enough to protect her child from manipulation, but it's always enough to welcome them home when they're ready to return. Most importantly, I've learned that declaring someone dead to you doesn't make them disappear. It just means you've chosen to close your eyes to the truth about who they really are. Sarah thought she was burying me with those words on Mother's Day. Instead, she buried herself in lies, in manipulation, in a false version of her own history. But the beautiful thing about being buried alive is that if you keep fighting, if you keep believing in the truth, eventually you'll dig your way back to the surface. And when you do, the people who really love you will be waiting with open arms. Have you ever experienced manipulation in your family relationships? Have you watched someone you love be slowly turned against you by someone with their own agenda? Tell me in the comments below. I read every single one, and your stories help other people feel less alone. And if this story resonated with you, if it reminded you that truth has a way of surfacing even when it's buried under layers of lies and manipulation, please hit that subscribe button. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply witness each other's truth. Remember, family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, and who loves you enough to fight for the relationship even when it gets messy. But real love never asks you to choose between the people who matter to you. Real love doesn't require you to rewrite your history or abandon the people who raised you. Sarah learned that lesson the hard way, but she learned it. And sometimes that's all we can ask for: the wisdom to recognize manipulation when we see it, the courage to admit when we've made a mistake, and the humility to come home when we're ready. Patricia thought she could replace a mother's love with sophisticated manipulation and expensive gifts. She thought she could convince my daughter that 23 years of devotion meant nothing compared to her vision of a better family. She was wrong. Because at the end of the day, you can't